There is a version of the world that almost happened. A world where the hum of electricity arrived 100 years before it should have. Where copper wires ran beneath cobblestones. Where the glow of cathode glass lit the faces of men in top hats and women in long, dark dresses. Where the age of information began not in the late 20th century, but at the very start of the 20th. In the fog and coal smoke and quiet ambition of a world that was still learning what it was. This is that world, not a warning, not a miracle, just a world where things went differently, where one invention arrived a little earlier, where the currents of history shifted, gently, the way a river shifts when a stone is moved in the night. Close your eyes, if you like. Let the images come slowly. We are going to walk through a world made of copper and glass and green light. And by the time we reach the end of it, you will have drifted somewhere quieter than this. The copper web. A world where the internet was born in 1900. The birth of the mechanical web. London, 1901, somewhere beneath the gray light of a London morning, in a building that smells of machine oil and warm metal, the first room hums. It is a vast space. The ceiling is high, supported by iron columns, and along every wall stand enormous wooden racks, floor to ceiling, filled with glass vacuum tubes. Each tube glows softly, a pale amber, a quiet orange, the color of candlelight seen through old curtains. They are arranged in rows so precise and so dense that they seem almost like a wall of fireflies, captured and suspended, each one holding a small piece of something that has not yet been given a name. Men in tweed waistcoats move between the racks. They move slowly, carefully, as one might move in a library or a church. They carry paper punch cards in their hands, and they feed these cards into the mouths of steam-driven readers, and the machines accept them with a sound like a slow, satisfied breath. This is where it begins. In a parlor on the west side of the city, a wealthy man sits at a mahogany desk. The room is furnished with heavy velvet curtains and a portrait of a woman above the fireplace. And on the desk, among the papers and the inkwell and the leather blotter, sits something that does not quite belong to the century it occupies. It is a terminal, polished brass and ivory, small, elegant, in a way that speaks of money spent trying to make something strange look familiar. Its screen is circular, barely larger than a pocket watch face, and it glows with green cathode light. Characters appear and disappear on its surface. The man types slowly, with 2 fingers, the way a man types who is still learning that this is something one does. He is sending a message to someone he has never met on the other side of the city. The message arrives. In the telephonic switching stations, young women in high-collared Edwardian blouses stand at long rows of brass switchboards. Their hands move with a kind of practiced grace, patching copper cables from one socket to another, connecting this street to that street, this building to that building, this thought to that thought. The vacuum tubes above their heads glow orange in long, warm lines. The sound in the room is a low, continuous clicking, like rain on a tin roof heard from inside a warm room. They do not know entirely what they are connecting. No one does yet. They only know that when they plug one cable into another, something travels between the two. Something invisible. Something that arrives and is understood and is answered. Outside, on the wet cobblestones of a gray London street, men climb wooden ladders in the rain. They wear heavy coats and flat caps and leather gloves, and they carry thick bundles of black coaxial cable, which they attach in careful coils to the ornate cast-iron lampposts that line the boulevard. Horse-drawn carriages pass below them, the horses untroubled, the drivers glancing upward with the mild curiosity of men who have seen stranger things. The cables accumulate slowly, street by street, like vines growing over a wall. No one sees the whole pattern from below. Only from above, from the upper windows of the tall buildings, can you begin to see it, the web of it, the way the lines converge and diverge and converge again, like veins in the back of a hand. In a workshop that smells of solder and old wood, a bearded man in a leather apron crouches over his invention. He calls it the Ethernet. He has been calling it that for 3 years, and the name has begun to stick, though no one is quite sure why. He adjusts a glass cathode ray tube with the careful, absorbed attention of a man who has been awake for a very long time and has stopped noticing. On the tube surface, a primitive grid appears. Green lines on green glass, forming squares, a kind of map of something that does not yet exist in space. He watches the grid. He does not move for a long time. Along the brick walls of a post station, copper tubes run from floor to ceiling, from room to room, out through the wall and under the street. An operator in a wool vest loads a small brass cartridge into a pressurized valve. The cartridge contains a printout. The printout contains a message. The valve opens. There is a whisper of compressed air, and the cartridge is gone. This is how information moves in the years before anyone has worked out how to make it move faster. In cartridges, in tubes, in the hands of men and women who carry it from one room to another, from one building to another, with the same patience they would carry any other small, fragile thing. At the docks, in the cold fog of early morning, a steamship is being loaded with something that does not look like cargo. Giant iron spools, each one taller than a man, are lifted slowly by chain and crane from the dock and lowered into the hold of the ship. The spools are wound with heavy cable, copper wire sheathed in gutta percha and steel, and the weight of each spool is enough to make the crane groan and the dock workers step back. This cable will cross the Atlantic. It will lie on the floor of the ocean in the dark and the cold for 100 years. And through it, for as long as it holds, the two halves of the world will be able to speak. In a Victorian laboratory somewhere south of the river, a young woman in an Edwardian dress stands very still. She is holding a notebook, but she has stopped writing in it. She is looking at a glass sphere, hand-blown and slightly irregular, in which a cathode tube has been installed. On the surface of the sphere, green text appears. Letters, words, a command line. The reflection of the letters moves across her face, and for a moment, her expression is the expression of someone who has understood something for the first time, something that will take years to explain. She does not write it down. She only looks. On a wooden workbench covered in tools and notes and the residue of 100 small experiments, there lies a keyboard. Its keys are made of bakelite, dark brown, slightly waxy, each one stamped with a letter in a serif typeface that was chosen by someone who thought the machine should look like it belonged to the world of books. Beside the keyboard, a tangle of copper wire and a small logic board, hand-assembled, the connections made with a soldering iron heated over a gas flame. Whoever built this has not yet decided what it is for. There are several possibilities. They are all sitting on the workbench in the form of notes, written in a small, precise hand. In the center of a vaulted brick room, a machine the size of a carriage prints numbers onto long ribbons of paper. It is steam-powered, and the steam vents upward through brass pipes into the cold air of the ceiling, where it disperses in slow, white plumes. The machine moves continuously, with a rhythm that is almost musical, almost restful. The ribbons of paper pile up on the floor in soft coils, like the shed skin of something that grows by producing its own record. A man stands beside the machine. He reads the ribbon as it comes out. He reads it the way a person reads a river, looking for patterns, for changes, for the thing that shouldn't be there. On a gray afternoon in a public square, a crowd has gathered. They are dressed formally, the way people dress when they go out in cities in 1901, coats and hats and gloves, all of it slightly damp from the morning's rain. They are gathered around a large iron frame, bolted to a wall, inside which a cathode screen scrolls green text. It is called the Electric Bulletin. The text on it is not quite news, not yet. It is something between news and rumor, something between a telegram and a shout. The crowd reads in silence. One man near the back reads it twice. Then he turns and walks away, and does not speak to anyone for the rest of the afternoon. In a factory, on a long assembly bench, men and women inspect glass bulbs one by one. They hold each bulb up to the light, turning it slowly, looking for the flaw that would make it useless. Most of the bulbs are fine, some are not. The ones that are not are set aside in a separate tray, and at the end of the day, the tray is taken away, and no one mentions it again. The factory smells of hot glass and machine oil, and the sound of it is a continuous low roar that becomes, after a while, indistinguishable from silence. In a home library that smells of wood polish and oil lamps, a young boy in a sailor suit sits at a small desk. He is typing on a mechanical terminal connected to a copper jack in the wall. His typing is slow and deliberate, each keystroke a small decision. On the screen in front of him, green lines appear, and he reads them with the same attention he gives to books, which is to say, he reads them as though they might contain something important, something that would change the nature of the afternoon. A brass and oak teleprinter runs at full speed. It types without stopping, characters arriving faster than they can be read. The copper gears and logic relays turning in the mechanical rhythm of something that has been given a task and will not rest until it is done. In the noise of the machine, it is possible to imagine that it is alive. High on a wooden pole, in the rain, a man in heavy leather gloves is splicing cables. He works with the focused, unhurried efficiency of someone who has done this many times before, who no longer needs to think about the individual steps, who can feel by touch alone whether a connection is good or not. The rain runs down the back of his neck and soaks through the shoulders of his coat, and he does not seem to mind. Below him, a street. Above him, the gray sky. Between his hands, two wires that are about to become one. In a government office, military officers in dark blue dress uniforms sit before machines that decode encrypted transmissions. The machines are heavy iron constructions filled with vacuum tube indicators that glow amber and red. The work is slow. The work requires a particular kind of patience, the patience of men who are trained to believe that what they are doing matters, even when they cannot quite see how. In a powerhouse beside the river, water-cooled vacuum tubes generate electricity for a municipal network node. Steam hisses from copper pipes. Green water moves through coils. A man in overalls reads a gauge and makes a note in a ledger. The ledger already has many notes in it. The notes are precise and small and describe the behavior of a system that has only recently become large enough to need monitoring. At the stock exchange, in the late afternoon, brokers in bowler hats shout at each other beside brass consoles that scroll numbers on mechanical displays. The numbers change. The men shout. Above the shouting, visible only if you stand very still and look upward, the green light of cathode screens glows with a kind of calm that has nothing to do with the men below it. At a ball, in a house on the edge of a quiet square, ladies in long silk dresses and gentlemen in tailcoats move slowly through rooms lit with candles and electric lights. Some of them, near the edges of the room, near the windows, check small devices on their wrists. Mechanical, brass, a tiny number glowing. They glance at the number and tuck their wrists back into the folds of their sleeves and resume the conversation they were having, which is about something else entirely. On the roof of a stone Victorian cathedral, an iron telecommunications antenna stands against a darkening sky. Storm clouds have gathered around it, and lightning, when it comes, finds the copper spires of the antenna first, and the energy of the storm is absorbed and directed and becomes something useful. This is the 20th century beginning. It hums. The Victorian Google, the great mechanical library. At a desk in the center of a great reading room, a scholar in a tweed suit sits before a search terminal. It is a beautiful object in the way that the machines of this world tend to be beautiful, which is to say, it is ornate and heavy and built to last and slightly too large for the desk. Its screen is circular. It glows green. The scholar types a query in a careful hand, then waits. The answer comes from somewhere below, from somewhere deep in the building, where the archive begins. The archive is enormous. Millions of small wooden drawers line the walls of a vast room, floor to ceiling, and women in long, dark Victorian dresses move along the towering shelves on rolling wooden ladders, retrieving data cards, cross-referencing, reshelving. The room is warm and smells of paper and cedar and the particular dry stillness of rooms where things are kept very carefully. The sound of the room is the sound of drawers opening and closing, of paper sliding against wood, of footsteps on the rungs of ladders. In this room, all the knowledge of the world is kept in small wooden drawers, and it is being sorted, always being sorted. Through a web of overhead iron pipelines, pneumatic tubes carry cylindrical containers from one part of the university library to another. An operator in a wool vest stands at a junction, catches a container as it arrives with a soft thump, opens it, reads the label, and routes it onward. He does this hundreds of times a day. He does it without thinking, the way a person breathes without deciding to. In a workshop adjacent to the main archive, a card sorting machine operates at speed. Thousands of punch cards pass through it in a single hour, each one touching the brass teeth of the sorter for only a fraction of a second before being directed to the correct bin. Paper dust rises in the air and hangs in the light from the high windows. A man stands at the output end of the machine, checking the sorted cards with the expression of a man who is looking for a specific thing and has not yet found it. In a London park on a foggy morning, citizens in formal dress queue on wet gravel paths beside a coin-operated brass directory kiosk. The kiosk is ornate. Its screen is small and green and scrolls text on request. A man in a top hat drops a penny into the slot and types a query, letter by letter, with one gloved finger. The trees drip. A horse-drawn carriage passes on the road beyond the park gate. The screen answers. In a reading room at a research institution, a massive digitizer machine moves slowly over an open, leather-bound book. Brass arms carry scanning lenses across the pages, line by line, while steam pistons move with a gentleness that seems almost deliberate, as though the machine knows it is handling something old, something irreplaceable. The book's pages are yellowed and close printed, and the machine reads them one by one, and somewhere in the building, what it reads is stored. Far below London, in a subterranean vault accessed by a narrow iron staircase, a watchman carries a brass lantern through a corridor that extends in both directions beyond the reach of his light. On either side of him, iron shelving units hold row upon row of data cards, each one stored in a paper sleeve, each sleeve labeled in a small hand. The vault is cool and dry, the air still. The watchman walks at a steady pace. He has been doing this for 11 years. He will do it for 11 more. At a brass digital microfilm reader, a scholar in a dark frock coat cranks the reader's wheel slowly, advancing through pages from a newspaper published 50 years before he was born. The images of old pages project onto a frosted glass screen and reflect across his face in white light. He reads carefully. He is looking for something specific, a fact, a date, a name. Whether he finds it is uncertain. What is certain is that he looks. In a long iron cabinet, hundreds of sliding brass vocabulary cards are arranged in the order of one language and cross-referenced with another. The machine translates. It is slow. It misses nuance. It renders idiom as statement and metaphor as description. But it produces text, and the text is readable, and the scholar who receives it on his green screen can understand what a Frenchman wrote, even though he has never spoken French. In a patent office, clerks catalog newly invented punch card patterns on large slate desks. The inventions arrive in small parcels, wrapped in brown paper, accompanied by handwritten descriptions. Some are useful, many are not. All of them are recorded. The office smells of ink and stone, and the faint, persistent smell of ambition. In a public school classroom, children sit at wooden desks. Each desk has a small typing terminal, connected by copper wire to the teacher's console at the front of the room. The teacher types a question. The question appears on every desk simultaneously. The children type their answers separately, privately, without looking at one another. The teacher reads all of them at once. On a large copper wall in a government building, a map of the world has been rendered in relief. Tiny brass flags move along the map's surface on motorized tracks, showing the flow of information between cities. Bulbs glow and dim as traffic increases and decreases. Someone stands before this map at all hours. Someone is always watching it. The map does not sleep. At a cafe on a Paris boulevard, patrons in Edwardian fashion sit at small tables and read. What they read is not quite a newspaper and not quite a letter. It is a printout, fresh from a small mechanical tableside teletype machine, warm to the touch, the ink still slightly wet. The machine on the table has a tiny glowing screen above its printout slot. The patrons ignore the screen. They prefer the paper. In a banking house, a machine the height of a building's interior ticks steadily in the center of a large hall. Its gears turn with enormous precision. Its amber dials show numbers. A clerk at a desk below it writes numbers into a ledger, though whether he is copying the machine or the machine is copying him is not entirely clear. A repairman in oil-stained overalls crouches inside an open server cabinet, adjusting the digital relays with a brass screwdriver. His face is marked with grease, and he works slowly, methodically, testing each connection with a small indicator light before moving to the next. He hums very quietly to himself, a tune without a name. At a post office counter, a citizen hands a copper-keyed telegram to an operator who types the message into a heavy cast-iron console. The console has porcelain keycaps. It has a small circular screen that shows the message as it is sent, letter by letter, disappearing as each one travels through the wire. Where it goes exactly, neither of them can say. Only that it arrives. In a meteorological office, scientists in dark coats stand before long paper charts and digital barometer indicators. The indicators are connected by telegraph to stations along the coast, and they update every hour. And every hour, the scientists adjust their charts, and every day they produce a forecast. And the forecast is usually right. Usually. In a sunroom, a young woman in an Edwardian dress sits at a polished wooden terminal. Light comes in through the window behind her, and the green text on her screen is nearly invisible in the brightness. She adjusts the angle of the screen. She reads. Whatever she reads holds her attention completely. In a factory, a mechanical card manufacturing machine cuts and stamps millions of holes into rolls of heavy cardstock. The punches come down with a regularity that, if you listen long enough, begins to sound like music. The paper scrap falls to the floor and is swept up by a man in a canvas apron at the end of each shift. Outside the Great Registry of London, on a foggy evening, a person stops on the pavement and looks up at the building. Thick copper cables climb the stone walls to the roof, where they disappear into vents and junction boxes. Steam rises from the building's upper floors in soft columns that merge with the fog and become indistinguishable from it. The person looks for a long time. Then they move on. The trenches and the digital wire. When war found the network. 1914 to 1916. In the mud and rain of northern France, in the year 1914, a different kind of machine has arrived. It is built into the trench itself, a heavy iron and brass server bolted to wooden planking, its vacuum tubes glowing green even in the rain. Thick spark gap antennas rise from it and emit, in irregular bursts, a crackling electrical sound that the men in the trench have stopped noticing. They have stopped noticing many things, but they have not stopped monitoring the machine, because the machine tells them where the enemy is, or rather, where the enemy was, which is close enough to useful. Letters through the copper web. By 1905, the network has grown quiet enough to be ordinary. It hums in the walls of offices and libraries and homes. It carries the weight of small things, receipts, weather reports, the price of wool, the time of the next train, and occasionally, without announcing itself, it carries something else. A voice looking for another voice. A question looking for an answer across a distance too large for the post. Pause fives. Eleanor Voss is 21 years old, and she has been working the switchboard for 3 years. She has her father's hands, broad and careful, and her mother's attention, which is to say, she notices everything. She notices, for instance, that certain transmissions arrive at the same hour every day from the same relay node in Warsaw. She notices that the signal has a particular quality, a steadiness, that suggests the sender is someone who types the way she does, without looking at the keys. In the telephonic switching station on Aldgate Street, the afternoon shift is the quiet one. The morning traffic of commerce has settled, and the evening traffic of personal messages has not yet begun. Eleanor uses this hour to read. She keeps a small book on the shelf beneath the board, and she reads one page at a time between connections. Today, she does not read. She is listening to the frequency from Warsaw. Arthur Voss retired from the Postal Engineering Service in 1903 after 31 years of laying cable under London. He knows the city's copper the way other men know the faces of old friends, by the particular quality of light they give off, by their silences, by what they do when the weather changes. He lives now in a flat in Bethnal Green with a cat, a large number of technical manuals, and a domestic terminal that he built himself from salvaged parts. Every morning he sends Eleanor a short message before she leaves for work. She has never told him she reads them on the board. On a foggy Tuesday morning, Arthur sits at his terminal and types. He is writing about something he saw the night before, a junction box on Whitechapel Road, one he helped install in 1887, that has started to hum at a frequency he does not recognize. It is not a fault. It is, he thinks, the sound of the network adjusting to its own weight, the way a building settles into its foundations. He wants Eleanor to hear it. He describes the sound in 3 sentences. She will understand. In his office on Fleet Street, Victor types a query into the public registry terminal. He is looking for the first person in London to use the network for a personal, non-commercial transmission. The registry has records going back to 1901. He finds the entry after an hour of searching. It was sent at 11:47 on the morning of March the 3rd, 1901, from a relay station in Whitechapel. The message has been archived. It says, "The cake is in the oven." He stares at this for a long time. He writes it down in his notebook. Marta Sobieski is the senior cataloger at the Municipal Library of Warsaw, and she has been corresponding with the Great Registry of London for 2 years through the transatlantic relay. She sends queries and receives answers and sends further queries, and the conversation between her and the registry has become, over time, something that resembles a friendship, although she has never met the women who work there, and they have never met her. She knows them by their typing rhythms. The one who handles medieval cartography types in long, confident bursts. The one who covers natural philosophy pauses between sentences, as though she is looking something up. On a Wednesday afternoon in October, Marta receives a transmission that was not addressed to her. It has been rerouted through her terminal by an error in the relay, and it takes her a moment to understand that it is not from London. It is from a domestic terminal in Bethnal Green, addressed to the switchboard station on Aldgate Street, and it describes a junction box on Whitechapel Road that hums at an unrecognized frequency. She reads it twice. She does not know why it has arrived at her desk. She routes it onward to its destination. But she copies the description of the sound into her notebook because she has heard something similar in the relay room of her own library on evenings when the traffic is light. She has always wanted to know what causes it. Thomas is in Warsaw in November when he receives a work order for the Municipal Library relay room. He arrives in the morning, reads the fault log, and spends an hour tracing a minor impedance in the secondary output line. While he is there, he notices the librarian watching him from across the room. Not with suspicion, with interest. The kind of interest that comes from someone who has spent a long time trying to understand something and has not yet found the right person to ask. What the network carries. Connections across copper and distance. In the city in 1907, the The network has become something that people forget is there, the way they forget the gas pipes under the street or the iron framework inside the walls. It is simply the way things are. Messages travel, answers arrive. The machines accept what is given and return what is asked, and no one thinks very much about the copper that makes it possible, or the people who keep it working, or the strange paths a transmission takes between the moment it leaves one hand and the moment it reaches another. Eleanor has begun to send her own messages on the secondary channel, the one that runs through the international relay. She sends them in the evenings, after her shift, using the terminal in the station's back office, which the supervisor has never minded her using. She is not sure precisely who she is writing to. She addresses them to the cataloger in Warsaw, whose rhythm she has memorized. She writes about the city, about the fog, about the way the switchboard sounds on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, like a conversation happening just below the threshold of hearing. In the great reading rooms, scholars have begun to use the network in ways its designers did not intend. A botanist in Edinburgh sends pressed flower specimens, rendered as data cards, to a correspondent in Vienna. A clockmaker in Amsterdam transmits the technical drawings for a new escapement mechanism to a colleague in Paris, who transmits back a modification that makes it work. A woman in Dublin sends her grandmother's recipe for brown bread to her sister in New Zealand, and the recipe travels under the Atlantic and surfaces 7 weeks later on a small screen in a kitchen that smells of butter and rain. Victor has found the junction box. He went to Whitechapel Road on a Thursday morning, following a note in the public registry about an unusual frequency, and he stood beside the cast iron post for 20 minutes listening. He could not hear the hum, but he found, bolted to the post beneath the junction box, a small brass plate with a serial number, and he traced the serial number to the installation records of 1887, and he found in the records the name of the engineer who installed it, Arthur Voss. He sends a query to the Postal Engineering Archive, which returns a retirement address in Bethnal Green. On a Friday afternoon, Victor Crane knocks on the door of a flat in Bethnal Green. A large cat regards him from the windowsill. An elderly man in a wool cardigan opens the door and looks at him with the expression of someone who has been expecting a visitor, though not necessarily this one. Victor explains who he is. Arthur Voss makes tea. The terminal on the wall glows quietly behind them, scrolling the evening's news, and neither of them looks at it. They talk for 3 hours about copper. Marta asks Thomas Healy, on the morning of his 3rd day at the library, what causes the sound. She describes it precisely: a frequency that appears in the secondary output line on evenings when the transatlantic relay is handling a high volume of traffic. She has been noting it in a log for 8 months. She shows him the log. Thomas sits down with it at her desk and reads through it carefully. He does not speak for several minutes. Then he says, "It is the cable, the ocean cable. When the traffic is heavy, the cable resonates. You are hearing the Atlantic." Marta writes this in her notebook. She writes it carefully, as though it is something she might need to remember precisely. Then she looks up at Thomas and asks if there is any way to make the resonance louder. Thomas considers this for a moment. He says he does not think so, but he will ask someone who might know. He writes an address in her notebook, below her notes. A flat in Bethnal Green. Thomas sends a transmission to Eleanor's station on his way out of Warsaw. He sends it on the secondary channel, through the international relay, and he addresses it to the switchboard operator who handles the Aldgate frequency, because he has noticed over the past 2 years that the transmissions on that frequency have a particular steadiness that suggests someone who pays close attention. He describes the resonance in the cable. He asks if she has noticed it from the London end. He signs it with his initial and his repair circuit number, which is how network technicians identify themselves, and which means almost nothing to anyone who does not know the convention. In a press room near Fleet Street, Victor sits at his desk and reads the draft of his first article. It is about the junction box on Whitechapel Road, and the engineer who installed it, and the 31 years of cable that the engineer laid under the city, and the way the city now rests on that copper, the way a life rests on its quiet foundations. He reads it twice. He thinks it is probably the best thing he has written. He sends it to the editor and goes home and makes dinner and does not think about it again until morning. Eleanor receives Thomas's transmission on a Thursday evening and reads it standing at the board, still in her headset. She has noticed the resonance. She has been noticing it for a year without knowing what it was. She writes a response immediately, which is not her habit. She usually waits a day before answering transmissions to make sure she is saying what she means. But this time, she knows what she means. She writes, "Yes, I have noticed it. It comes in the evenings when the traffic is heavy. I thought there was something wrong with the line." She pauses, then she adds, "It is a relief to know it is the ocean." In the subterranean archive beneath the registry, a night archivist works alone, cataloging a new collection of data cards. The collection has come from a postal engineering archive in the north of the city, the records of a man who spent 31 years measuring and documenting every cable he laid. The cards are numbered and cross-referenced and precise, and as the archivist works through them, drawer by drawer, shelf by shelf, she has the feeling of walking through the city underground, following the copper routes to their junctions, understanding for the first time the shape of the thing that runs beneath everything. At a cafe on a quiet street in Warsaw, Marta reads the letter that has arrived by post from a flat in Bethnal Green. It is from Arthur Voss, who received her address from Thomas Healy, who received it from Eleanor, who received it from Marta's original message, rerouted by accident through her terminal. The letter is handwritten, 4 pages, and describes the installation of the transatlantic relay cable in 1901, the weight of the spools, the sound the winch made when it lowered them into the hold, the smell of the gutta percha in the cold morning air. She reads it slowly. The cafe is warm. Outside, it is raining. By 1910, the network is simply there, as ordinary as weather, as unremarkable as the street beneath your feet. People check their terminals the way they check the clock, not because they expect anything particular, but because it is a habit now, a way of touching the larger world without leaving the room. Arthur Voss has become, without intending it, something of a correspondent. Victor's article about the junction box was published in the Evening Illustrated and read by a great many people who did not know they cared about cable engineering. And now Arthur receives transmissions from strangers who have questions about the network. He answers all of them. He is precise and patient and occasionally funny, and he types at a speed that surprises people who are meeting him for the first time, which is most people, because until now he has been alone with his cat and his manuals and the terminal he built himself from salvaged parts. He does not mind the company. On a foggy London street, business owners in frock coats and top hats check handheld digital tablets, connected to the network by coaxial cables that loop down from iron hubs at the corners of the streets. Stock graphs glow green. Weather reports arrive. Small, ordinary facts travel back and forth across the copper, all morning, every morning. Marta has begun a correspondence with the night archivist at the registry, whose name she has learned through a small error in the routing headers, a woman called Agnes who works alone in the lower levels and who turns out to have spent 15 years cataloging a collection of medieval maps that Marta has been trying to access for most of her professional life. They write to each other daily now through the international relay. Their messages pass through the junction box on Whitechapel Road, through the relay at Aldgate, under the Channel, and across to Warsaw. Marta can hear the resonance of the cable in the relay room on evenings when their correspondence is particularly long. In a school, children sit at wooden desks, each with a small typing terminal. The teacher types a question. It appears on every desk simultaneously. The children type their answers, separately, privately, without looking at one another. The teacher reads all of them at once. Outside the school windows, the city hums. Thomas is in Edinburgh in the spring, replacing a corroded junction in the northern relay, when he receives a transmission from Warsaw. It is from Marta. She has a question about the resonance. She has noticed that it changes character slightly depending on the time of year, and she wants to know if this is the temperature of the water or the weight of the traffic or something else entirely. Thomas reads this on the small screen of his portable terminal, sitting in a relay station that smells of oil and stone, with rain against the windows. He does not know the answer. He writes back, "I will find out." Then he adds, "The question is excellent." On the Thames, on a quiet evening, a steam launch moves through thick fog. Inside the wood-paneled cabin, passengers sit in comfortable silence. On a polished desk, a maritime computer console glows green. No one is looking at the screen. They are looking at the fog through the cabin windows, watching it move. Victor has finished the series. 12 articles published over 18 months about the network and the people who built it, and the people who use it, and the people who keep it running. The final article is about a sound, a resonance in the transatlantic cable that can be heard in relay rooms on evenings when the traffic is heavy. He describes it as the sound of the ocean carrying the weight of human conversation. The editor reads the draft and tells him it is sentimental. Victor says yes, probably. He submits it anyway. It is the most read thing he has ever written. In a grand library, a scholar reads electronic text files on an arm-mounted cathode screen. The screen is adjustable, and he adjusts it constantly, finding the angle that lets him read without strain. The library is quiet around him, as libraries have always been quiet, as they will continue to be in this world or any other. Eleanor and Thomas have met finally in the spring of 1910, when his repair circuit brings him through London, and she arranges to be at the station on the same afternoon. They have been writing to each other for 3 years on the secondary channel, and she knows his typing rhythm as well as she knows her own. And when she sees him come through the door of the station, she recognizes him without needing to be introduced. He is the sort of person, she thinks, who moves through the world the way a good signal moves through copper, without waste, without friction, arriving exactly where he meant to arrive. In a kitchen in a Victorian house, a young woman stands before a wall-mounted brass computer. She types on its porcelain keyboard. The screen shows a shopping list. Outside, rain falls on a garden that needs attention. She finishes her list and closes the screen. Through the copper in the wall, somewhere below her, the city carries on its constant quiet conversation with itself. In a banking hall, tellers work behind dark mahogany counters. Each desk has 2 amber cathode monitors and a brass accounting terminal. The sound of the hall is the sound of a great many small transactions being processed simultaneously, a murmur of machine work that sounds, after a while, like a river. Arthur receives a visitor on a Saturday morning in June. It is Marta Sobieski, who has come to London for a conference of archivists and who has taken a detour to Bethnal Green. She stands in his doorway holding a small box of pastries from a bakery she found near the station, and she looks exactly as he expected she would. Which is to say, she looks like someone who has spent a great deal of time paying careful attention to things. They sit at his kitchen table and eat the pastries and talk about cable engineering and the sound of the ocean in the relay room and the letter he wrote her 7 years ago about the smell of gutta percha in the cold morning air. The terminal on the wall glows quietly behind them. Outside, the city hums. In a government building, a tower of mechanical calculation fills an entire interior space. Hundreds of rotating axles turn. Brass gears mesh. A wall of cathode screens displays active database queries. Clerks in wool waistcoats sit at brass terminals along the base of the tower, typing queries upward into its architecture and waiting for what comes back down. On a rocky coast, a navigation beacon stands in the dark. Its brass lenses rotate at a precise and measured speed. At its base, a digital transmitter system pulses, its glass valves glowing amber in the stone room, its oscilloscope monitor showing the wave it sends out over the water. The wave travels. In the dark, on the water, someone receives it. At an outdoor market in the rain, citizens in bowler hats browse under canvas awnings. The stalls sell second-hand electronic terminals, copper wire coils, and glowing testing screens. The rain patters on the wet wooden tables, and the traders watch their customers with the patient attention of people who have something to sell and all the time in the world in which to sell it. In a study, a gentleman sits in a leather armchair beside a fire, reading what has been sent to him from the network. Behind him, his butler programs the household mainframe with a careful, practiced hand. In a repair shop, a technician with grease on his face bends over a disassembled teletypewriter. He adjusts a vacuum tube with a brass tool, tests the connection with a small indicator, replaces a piece of copper circuitry. A hanging bulb lights the bench. He hums to himself quietly, a tune without a name. Somewhere at the edge of a city that runs on copper and glass and the slow hum of electrical potential, a man stands on a high grassy cliff. He is alone up here. Below him, a harbor. Steamships move between the docks, their lights reflecting in water the color of old pewter. Copper signal masts at the harbor mouth pulse with soft rhythms, communicating something to something else, across a distance he cannot quite measure from where he stands. In his hand, a portable brass transmitter. Its screen glows green. He is not sending anything. He is only holding it, looking out. This is the world that the wire made. Not better, not worse, only faster and stranger, and more thoroughly connected than anyone who built the first room of vacuum tubes in a London building in 1901 could have imagined. The information moved and kept moving, and the world moved with it. And the world that moved was both more and less than the world that stood still. All of it built from copper, all of it lit by glass, all of it humming very quietly beneath everything else. And now the hum grows softer, the green light dims. The machines continue their work without you, in the dark, in the warmth, in the slow electrical patience of a world that does not need to be watched to keep running. The cables hold, the signal travels. Somewhere in London, in a room you will never visit, a rack of vacuum tubes glows amber in the night. No one is watching them. They do not need to be watched. They only need to be there, doing what they do, sending and receiving in the long, unbroken quiet that follows the last thought before sleep. Let that quiet in now. Let the hum of it be the sound of nothing in particular. Let the green light be far away and rest.